Okay, well, it's 12:05, and I think it's about time to get started with today's Lunch and Learn about writing a business plan. A few things. First off, I'm going to go through the entire presentation, and if you would please save your questions to the end, I would appreciate that. We'll have time at the end for some Q&A. Secondly, I will be recording this training, so if you want to go back and review it at the end, you can do that, or you can send this off to a friend. We'll be posting this on the website, or you can send me an email at dlucas@credofinance.com, and I'll get you a copy of the recording. So, without further ado, I will begin the training with our first slide. And if you are entering the contest, this is a great place for you to start, and I think that this training will give you all you need to know about writing your business plan. First off, one of the things I wanted to say to anybody that's just getting started or writing their first business plan, what's really important is the KISS rule. And if you're not familiar with the KISS rule, it is keep it simple, stupid. And what that means is basically don't overcomplicate writing the business plan, especially in the beginning. You can do a 50-page business plan, but I would say you can easily do a one business plan. From this is to do an executive summary, and your executive summary wants to be, or you need it to be very big picture. And a lot of times when you speak to investors or banks or whatnot, you'll find that you have about 60 seconds to communicate to them what you're trying to do and what your business plan is. And so you really need to kind of boil this thing down to a one-pager. So my advice would be don't overcomplicate it in the beginning. As you get into your business and start getting traction and start getting different types of funding, you can start digging into the different details and really expanding on each one. The first step in determining this big picture, and this is very high level, is simply you're going to sell A to B. You're going to sell A to B, and that's because C isn't doing it very well. So that's the first statement you really need to think about, and you need to define what A, B, and C are if they're variables. You're going to sell widgets to hospitals because the competitors are selling them too expensive, or they're not getting to the hospitals in time, or for whatever reason. So this can easily be a one-sentence statement as to what your overall business plan is. Now, digging down a little bit deeper in this, that's sort of the big picture. Now we're going to go down and we're going to open it up into 4 different areas, okay? And this has been termed, I've heard this termed in other areas as the 4 M's. We have your model, the money, the management, and the market. So these are your 4 main areas. So if you do a one-page business plan, you're going to want to have 4 different paragraphs at a minimum that cover each of these areas. So the first one would be your business model. And that really simply is how you're going to make a profit. If you haven't thought about that, you definitely need to. But you need to be able to explain how you're going to be able to make a profit in a short period of time. Number 2 is money. Where will you get funding for your business? And how are you going to use it? How are you going to get funding along the way? How are you going to run your business? Investors and banks want to make sure you're not going to run out of money and that this is something you've already thought through. Number 3 is management. Who's going to be executing this plan? A lot of businesses have great plans, but they fail in the execution. And banks and investors know this. So you want to list out who's going to be on the management team, who's going to be executing the plan. And 4th, it's your market. Who are your customers? Who are you going to be selling to? What does your market look like? Why do you think you're going to be able to compete? So again, these are broad brushstrokes, but you need to cover these 4 areas even in a simple business plan that's only 1 page. So now that we've done that, now that we've looked at these 4 areas, now we can dive into each area a little bit. So the first M is your business model. And in your business model, you want to explain what you're selling. You're either selling a product or you're selling a service. You need to clearly define and clearly explain exactly what you're selling. Second part of this is that you need to explain your financial model. And I think a lot of people have heard the term financial modeling, financial model, financial analysis, different types of terms that to some people can be intimidating. But really, all this means is how are you going to make money? In other words, for every dollar of sales, how many cents are going to make up the different costs? So, for instance, in my business, which is a service business, for every dollar of cost, our model allows for a certain portion of that to go to labor, a certain portion of that to go to marketing, to go to rent, et cetera, and then you have a certain target amount that will go for profit. So this does not have to be overly complex, but you have to be able to show out of each dollar of revenue where it's going to go to, and then of course at the end you want to have some profit left over. Different industries will have different levels of profit. There's no doubt about that. So when you're explaining your pricing, when you're explaining your financial model, first thing you need to do is explain your pricing. What will you charge? And how does that compare to the marketplace? If you're pricing a product or a service way above everybody else, you're probably not going to do very well. And so that's something you need to do some research on, but you need to explain what your pricing is going to look like and how that compares to the marketplace. Second, you need to talk about your revenues. You want to show what your revenues are going to look like in the first year. And of course, hopefully, you want to show some growth. Some businesses don't have any revenues in the first year, and that's expected. And that gets back to our next slide, which will talk more about money and the funding. But you really need to show where the sales, or what the sales are going to look like at least for the next 3 years. Better if you can do it for 5. But so I would say as a rule of thumb, do 3 to 5 years. And again, number 3, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, is the costs. You've got to figure out, you've got to take that dollar and look at it sort of like a piece of pie and slice it up and say for every dollar of sales, where is that going to go and cover my costs, and then how much is going to be left over for profit. Fourth part is your KPIs. That stands for Key Performance Indicators. That's a term and an acronym that's thrown around a lot. And this really shows how you're going to monitor the health of the business. This is easy. This allows the bank or any investor to easily understand how the business is going to run and how you're going to monitor the health, and it really shows that you know what you're doing. For instance, in my business, one of our KPIs is revenue per employee. We're a service business, and we have employees that provide services, and we can take a KPI of revenue per employee. We can make targets. We can set goals on it. We can compare it to the marketplace. Okay, we can do some benchmarking, and we can show that that's something that we're going to really be watching, and that's how we're going to be monitoring the health of the business. That's all part of your financial model. And then, of course, this probably goes without saying, but it's important, is you need to detail your profit margins. You need to show what your gross profits are going to be and what your net profits are going to be. In other words, what are your profits going to be from the core product or core service, okay, before you get your company overhead, overhead being things like rent, postage, office supplies, etc. A lot of investors want to see how much margin you're bringing to cover that overhead, because a lot of times the overhead can be static or fixed, and so they really want to see how you can grow that gross profit. And then, of course, the net profit. You definitely want to show the net profit, and you want to show your profit over time, because obviously at the end of the day, if you're not showing profits, you will have a hard time getting funding. So that's the business model, and that brings us to, as promised, the money part of it. And if you've ever watched Shark Tank, there's a guy on there, I think his name's Kevin. They call him Wonderful, and this is his thing. He always says it's about the money at the end of the day. And when you're dealing with investors in the bank, that's very true. At the end of the day, it's all about money. You need to answer in your business plan how you're going to fund your initial needs. Are you going to get loans? Are you going to use credit cards? Are you going to get money from family? Are you going to put money in yourself? Are you going to raise funds from various investors around? private money, you need to show the source of funds to get started. Some businesses are heavy in needing initial startup funds, and some businesses aren't. Some businesses can start with revenue on day one, and they need very little. On the flip side, they may need ongoing cash needs. So that brings me to my second point. How are you going to fund ongoing needs of cash? So if I was to present my company to somebody, they're going to want to know if your accounts receivable gets really big, how are you going to fund payroll? And I'd have to explain to them that we'll use a working capital line of credit, et cetera, that I've got all my bases covered. Okay? Am I going to use loans? Am I going to use credit cards? In some instances, you can use something that it looks like staggered or milestone funding from private investors. Sometimes private investors will give you a certain amount of money up front, and then when you hit certain milestones or certain dates, they will put more money in the company instead of just giving it to you all at once. They'll stagger it when you've met certain milestones, like certain sales numbers or a certain number of customers or a certain date, et cetera, et cetera. So that could be a source of money. Or taking the company public. You know, I would never let your vision be too small and not do something like that. It may be an option for you, and if that's an option for you, then I would put it in there. I mean, if that's your vision for it and you're ambitious, this is your chance to set forth what you want to do with your company and to try to brag a little bit about the future of it. So, two things. Again, how are you going to fund this thing to get started, and how are you going to fund it ongoing? I will tell you from experience, investors really like you to have this well planned out, and they really like to know that there's cushion and that there's enough money to cover contingencies. Okay, it's a common mistake for entrepreneurs to undercapitalize or not have enough money to fund their business, and so they really want to think that you've thought through, you need money now, you're going to need money later, and then what are all your safety nets? The last part of this is how you're going to get paid. Are you going to take credit cards? Are you going to do checks or cash? Are you going to get paid up front? Are you going to invoice people? Are you going to receive payment at the time that you deliver the product or service? All these things are important, as investors and banks would like to know if you're going to be extending credit to people or getting paid in advance or right up front. You know, obviously there's less risk when you're not carrying receivable balances and waiting to get paid on things. So that's the money part of this. So the third M of the 4 M's is management. And you should be answering the question in this part of your business plan that who will be performing the key functions of the business. A good business plan is great, but without any execution, where most businesses fail, you know, obviously it's going to go nowhere. So somebody that's investing and looking at your business plan, they want to know who's going to be doing the work. In other words, who am I investing in? Yes, I'm investing in the idea, but who's on the team that's going to execute this? And you can't just think of this as one person being the president. There's different functions that have to happen in each company. Okay, first one is sales and marketing, and it goes hand in hand with product and service development. Okay, who's going to be selling? Who's going to be doing the marketing? Who's going to be developing the product? Who's going to be evolving the product or service as the market changes? Who's going to be in charge of that? Okay, information technology. If you don't use information technology in today's day and age, you're going to fail very quickly. I think that goes without saying. Who's managing your information technology? Okay, and what's your security? Okay, how do we know that the data is going to be safe? How do we know that it's not going to be compromised? Finance. Who's going to be operating in the CFO function? I mean, that's something that we do at our firm, obviously, for a lot of different clients, is that outsourced CFO function. But who's going to be taking care of the money? Next is the company vision and strategy, which will most likely be you, the CEO. Okay? That is, who is driving the vision of the company? Who is driving the strategy of the company? That usually is the person that's writing this business plan. But who's doing that? They want to know. Who's taking care of operations? Who's doing the day-to-day stuff? Okay? Who's going to the store and getting office supplies? Who's keeping up the website? Who's paying the bills, et cetera, et cetera? Customer service. Who's going to take care of customer problems? Who's going to make sure that they're happy? Who's going to talk to them on the phone? Who's going to make sure you're monitoring it and that you know how you're doing compared to the market? And that goes along also with the last point, product and service quality. Who's monitoring the quality of the service that's being done, the quality of the products? Because we can sell a lot of stuff in the first year, but we won't sell a lot in year 3 if we don't have good customer service and we're not putting good quality products up there. Now, that sounds overwhelming. And the entrepreneur often fulfills all these roles at first. But it's a very good business practice to detail each one, to show that you understand that all of these things need to be done. And if you have a plan to eventually delegate the key functions, include it. So if you have a partner that's going to come aboard to act as your CFO, put that in your plan. If you have somebody that's going to come on and act as your COO, put it in your plan. Put yourself as in charge of all these different functions, and then if you can slowly show that you're going to delegate these out to other people, that's really going to impress some people and going to show that you really thought this through. But you've got to make sure that these different areas are covered and discussed in your business plan. So that's the third M. So now that brings us to the fourth M, which is your market. And with a broad brush stroke, this is very simply, who are you going to sell to? Who's your customer? Are you going to be selling to businesses? Are you going to be selling to individuals? Are you going to be selling to schools, hospitals? Who are you going to be selling your product to? This is important because people need to understand the market and they need to understand who the buyer is so that they can picture that person making a purchase. If they can't picture people buying your product or service, it's hard to get them over the hump to investing in your business. You want to briefly explain the overall market you'll be competing in. Give a little bit of its history. Give your future outlook. When I talk about our tax services, I can talk about the millions and millions of taxpayers that need tax services. I can talk about the market. I can explain how big the market is and the competitors in the marketplace. And I can explain all that. That's something you'll need to do with your business as well. You also need to answer the question of how you're going to reach them. How are you going to get to your customer? Are you going to do it through the internet? Are you going to do it door-to-door? Are you going to do it by networking? You need to let the investor, the banker know, whoever's reading your business plan, how you're going to get to the customer. And then you need to talk about who your key competitors are. Who are you competing against out there in the market? Who are the customers considering using besides you? And partially, the investors need to understand this, but you need to understand this as well so that you understand how to create a competitive advantage over the people competing against you in the marketplace. So again, that brings me to the next point. What is your advantage over them, and why would someone buy from you? You need to be able to explain. Last is you have to explain. You have to communicate how you're going to get knowledge of your brand and/or your product marketplace. How you're going to get to them, what resources you're going to use to get to them. Internet marketing is a big piece now. It's something that if you're not considering it, you should. Even if you're not going to use internet marketing or technology to market, I would advise you to put in there a reason why. Because if you don't have it in there, it's a question that any logical reader is going to ask. Why are you not using technology? Why are you not using the internet? And if you don't feel that's the right way to do it, then I think you should say that. So now that we've been through the 4 M's, and again, to review this, I'm going to record this, and I will put this out on the website. And if you want to send me an email later, and I'll put my email address up here in a second, you can email me and I'll send this to you. And I can even send you a copy of the PowerPoint as well. I'm happy to do that. You can go back and you can review these 4 M's, and if you write your business plan, you can go back and see that you've included all these items. But here's some final thoughts. So we've been through the 4 M's. Minimum, those are the things you have to do. Some extra credit items on this. If you can put a company overview in your business at the top, I do think that is a good practice. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's a good practice. You can explain who you are, what your background is, what you do, what you've done in the past. Talk about why you're doing this, what you're doing now, where you plan on doing it. Are you going to operate out of your basement? Are you going to get an office? Give us a summary of what's going on with you. Who are you? And what gap in the market did you see that's driving you to do this? Something caused you to want to start this business. A lot of times, I would say most of the time, you see a gap. You see demand for something that's not being fulfilled or not. You can either fill it better. That's something you should explain. Okay, that's going to get somebody about your business. The overview to, I guess, for lack of reading, reading. You have less than a minute to grab the attention of the person reading your business plan. So if you can put one of these 2 is including a SWOT analysis. Some people they read SWOT analysis and they get it. People with very high-strung type A personalities like SWOT analysis. You're going to see a lot of investors that like SWOT analyses. A SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you put the 4 of those in different quadrants, and you go through and you list and bullet point all the strengths of your business, the weaknesses, the opportunities for the business or in the marketplace, and then the threats, which would include things like competition. You can look up SWOT analysis on Google and get more information than you ever probably wanted on it. But it's a really good way to give somebody a 1-page summary of what your business is looking at, what your competitive advantage is, and it gives a whole picture to the investor of a business plan. Next is to explain the long-term plan. Do you have an exit strategy? Do you want to raise capital and then buy the company back from somebody? Okay, sometimes that gets people excited because they don't want to necessarily be in your company forever. Do you want to take the company public and eventually cash out the investors? Do you want to eventually just be an owner of the company and share ownership with somebody and eventually replace yourself and hire another president? Let them know what your vision is, because sometimes you'll get people hung up on, they'll put money in, they want to know when they can get it out. They're not going to give it to you forever. I mean, at some point they're going to want to liquidate and turn it into cash. So if you have an exit strategy or can explain one, all the better. If you can detail any strategic alliances or relationships you have that will help you to succeed, that's going to be a huge plus. Okay? If you're going into an area where you need a patent, okay, if your best friend is a patent attorney, put that in there. If you're patenting a drug and one of the guys that's going to be your COO worked at Pfizer for 30 years, put that in there. Okay? Put in there what your strategic alliances are. Put in there what your relationships are. Okay? So the investors can understand the people that you know and who's going to help you succeed on this. Lastly, detail any potential customers that you have already committed to once you're up and running. A lot of times if people are selling products, they'll get huge purchase orders from Walmart or Target that say that they intend on purchasing your product as soon as you get the funding. That's a much easier way to bring an investor to give you money than not having anything sold in the first place. If you're selling services, sometimes you can get petitions or you can get letters from people saying that as soon as you get your business up and going, they intend on becoming a client. Whatever you can do to show the investor at bank that your customers are ready and rearing to go, the better off you're going to be. And the last point is that this is a very simplistic presentation about writing a business plan, although I do think if you write a business plan along these lines, you'll have a very good business plan that covers all the bases you need to cover. If you need to go more in depth on something, which you can't. Business plans can be hundreds of pages long, and if you go into an MBA program, etc., you'll write long business plans with lots of detail and analysis. They can be done, but in the real world, a lot of times, especially in small business for entrepreneurs, I see them done more often after partners have already come in, after there's already been commitments in place, et cetera, to go forward. With that, I am going to conclude the meeting. I'm going to open questions in just a second. But if you have any questions or you think of something later on, you can call me at 678-822-7593. My email address is dlucas@credofinance.com. And you can call me or email me, ask me any question. Again, I can send you a recording of this or a PDF of the PowerPoint. And if you are entering the contest, good luck to you. And if you are not, encourage someone else to do so. And again, our contest email address is, not email address, website is www.addcredo.com. Now, if you'll give me 1 minute here, I'm going to try to enable the sound to see if there's any questions. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the little window at the bottom here, or just speak up if you can unmute your mic. So I'll give about 60 seconds to see if anybody has any questions.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Set it up. You can unmute yourself at any time. I think I had it on mute on accident. And again, if you don't feel comfortable asking a question in this forum, feel free to just send me an email or call me later. Okay, I just had a question come in that says, is it possible for me to send you my plans so far? I think it's from someone that's intending on entering the contest. Absolutely, send it to me. I'll be more than happy to look at it, give you feedback on it. If you're entering the contest, I can look at it, give you some feedback on it before you make your official entry. That's absolutely no problem. Somebody here is mentioning that they have a huge vision for their company, but not sure they have the cash to pull it off. I think that's part of your business model. When you look at the 4 M's to look at the money part of it, and I think you have to explain how much money you need. You know, I mean, investors want to know, and banks, they want to know what it's going to cost. You know, you don't have to put sugar on top of it. If it's going to cost $1 million to get this done, tell them it's going to cost $1 million. They're going to assume it's going to cost you $2 million. So, you know, if you've ever seen that show Shark Tank, the money that these guys are asking for from the sharks know it's going to take a lot more than what these guys are asking for. So don't be bashful about it. Show that you know what you're doing. Show that you're have business savvy, and show that you know it's going to take a lot of money to do this, and that you weren't born yesterday. All right, I'm going to close the webinar now. If you have any other questions, call or email me and let me know what those questions are. I thank you for attending, and please keep your eye out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn for our next Lunch and Learn, which will be next Wednesday. You can also check our website at credofinance.com for more information, or email me at dlucas@credofinance.com. Thanks a lot.